So welcome to SYSTRAcast. This is the podcast for the UK and Ireland. My name's Vicky, one of the wellness champions, and today we will be discussing work-life balance. The way we maintain our work-life balance is by setting boundaries between our work and personal lives. These boundaries can look different for all of us. Some are more comfortable keeping work and their personal life completely separate. Others are happy to integrate the two, and many lie somewhere in between depending on the context and the time. Following on from our Wellness Pulse survey, work-life balance was identified by many as a key area of focus. So today we're just going to explore how others manage this to help colleagues discover their healthy practices that they might wish to apply to themselves. I'm joined today by Charlotte Woodhall-Jones, Discipline Lead for Geotech, Ollie Birkill, Team Leader for Civils, and Chris Shaw, an Associate Director for Consultancy. To get going, let's just start with some introductions. So Charlotte, if you can please introduce yourself, outline your role and your working hours.
No problem. Thanks, Vicky. I'm Charlotte Woodhall-Jones, and I'm the discipline lead for the tunnels and ground engineering part of the UK business. I would describe my working pattern as incredibly agile. I think I'm on my second, maybe third working pattern with SYSTRA since joining the business in December 2022. I commenced on a 3-day split week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, then went to a 3-day in a row, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I now have the privilege of doing what I call a term time working pattern. So I work 4 days a week during school term, Monday through Thursday, and then during school holidays, I work a 2-day week on a Tuesday and Wednesday.
Great, thanks very much, Charlotte. Ollie, if you can go next, please.
Yeah, sure. I'm Ollie Birkill. I'm a principal engineer and I'm part of the engineering division. I work in the civils team doing railway civil engineering. I work Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays and I do 7.5 hours a day. I've been doing that for about 2 years now.
Thanks very much, Ollie. Chris, no means last, but please.
Hey, so yeah, I'm Chris. I work out of Edinburgh doing traffic modelling. So I've been with SYSTRA, well, I worked for a company before SYSTRA that got bought by SYSTRA in around 2017, 2018. So I carried over the terms with me that came that I was working with at the time for SIS, which was a 4-day working week, but slightly oddly not consistent week to week. So it's a 2-week pattern where it's 3.5 days one week. And 4.5 the next week, effectively, which at the time was wrapped around childcare and being able to balance between my other half and myself for school pickups and drop-offs and such. Effectively now, what I end up doing is pretty much working Friday mornings consistently, and yeah, balancing the time, the rest of the whatever I'm due to work that week, sort of around the rest of the days effectively, which, you know, worked quite nicely. So sometimes if I have a particularly pressing work meeting on a Friday morning, I will jump on that call. Other times, you know, I won't work Fridays at all and I'll make up my time through the rest of the week. So yeah, I'm lucky enough to be able to work it pretty flexibly, to be honest.
Great, thanks everyone. So the first thing I thought we could discuss is about having firm lines. So do you prefer to have like a firm, strict line between your home and work, or is it more of a blurred line, or do you not really have a line at all? And how does technology impact this with, you know, having your phone and you might have your work apps on there that you might be tempted to check on days off?
So I don't have any work stuff on my phone other than the authenticator for Microsoft. Basically never have and don't really have a need or interest in doing so. Historically, I had a fixed PC that I had when I worked at SIS, and that was my SYSTRA machine for a number of years. In fact, quite far into lockdown before I got a laptop because it just never came up needing one. So for all that time, when I left the office, I was gone.
Yeah.
Effectively, and yeah, so lockdown kind of changed that a little bit in terms of life was obviously somewhat bonkers during that period, and you know you're juggling a lot of things, home life, homeschooling, and trying to work at the same time. And I think during that period the lines got a little bit more blurred for me, as you might imagine, and that probably has, you know, persisted subsequently. I've now got a laptop, so I'm not purely only working when in the office now, so I'm working probably most of my time in the office and then a little bit of time if I go home early to be in for the kids getting back from school, I'll be working at home on my laptop. And again, there's a temptation, I think, in those scenarios to knock off a little bit early, make the tea, come back and do a little bit more after tea, or let meetings run over or whatever. So yeah, I think it very much has changed for me. And I think the thing that changed that was because I could now because of technology, because I had a laptop now and didn't previously. So yeah, it's quite an interesting change for me.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
And so I can dovetail onto the back of that one, because I think that the technology bit is probably the biggest penetration to a fixed line. So my firmish, let's go firmish, I won't go into a geotechnical pun in this one, but the firmish boundary that I have is Friday. I don't work a Friday, so that's my day off. It's also the day that I focus on personal wellness. I have a personal trainer, and that's a nice, for me, it's a nice way of completely disassociating with the working week that's gone beforehand. The reason I say firmish is there are some occasions, but it's by personal contracting into and me saying yes to that I would maybe attend a client meeting on a Friday, but 9 times out of 10 the answer would be a no. But the linking to the technology part that Chris mentioned is it's the work mobile phone. So it's not necessarily on the day off, it's more the evenings and after work, where you might have the work mobile phone near you, and maybe and for me, again, it's I choose to do this. It's not an expectation of role, because I am a woman of a certain age, that I've openly in perimenopausal. I use it to document my thinking, and when a thought comes into my brain of something that I might have forgotten during the day, because it's like a bubble that's floating around and I'm not being able to capture it. So I choose to, but don't expect a response to, email somebody on an evening, and I would usually do that as a scheduled send, or a note to myself, or an email to myself to remind myself in the morning. But I would say that's where the blurriness comes. It's technology and the availability of technology, and that hybrid working from home, whilst that has enabled me to undertake the role that I'm doing in a flexible working arrangement. Whilst that's been a champion for that, is also a slight negative of that hazy boundary, the blurry edge to the work-life balance, because it is there, it is visible, it is seeing. So one of the resilience pillars I put in place on occasions when I know that I've gone a bit too far is I lock the phone and the laptop in the office. So I know that's once it's locked and I've walked out of the office, so I disassociate my workspace when I'm working at home, and that means I can't play with the phone, I can't send those emails, I can't interact with anything on Teams. But the Friday is the hard, firmish boundary.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm slightly contrasting to you both there, and that I try, and I'm fairly successful in maintaining a firm line between my sort of work and outside work life. I've got Teams on my phone, but I use that for checking my calendar to see if tomorrow has an early start or I need to be in a different office, rather than to send messages. I keep notifications turned off. And when I am working, I'm often what I'm doing at the moment is often quite deep focused tasks, so dipping in and out of those isn't really a way to do those well. I think people are tolerant of a sort of dashed off email that you've obviously written with half brain, just to pass some thoughts on, but when it's checking a calc or a report, what matters is that single-minded focus on it. So both what I'm doing outside work and what I'm doing inside work doesn't really lend itself to blurring at the moment, at least. One thing that I do find is that comparing with my experience in the past, is the processes we're building around work are actually the things that cause the lines to blur. So we used to be a lot more informal about delegation and giving conditional consent. So I might sign the back page of a report and say, when you fix all the other mistakes in it, here's a signature sheet to scan in and then send the report off. Whereas now we're working with digital workflows where it has to be tied to a particular user and a particular user account to click the button. So sometimes when I find the blurring happens, it's I have to be there on button clicking time to click the button. I can't delegate that to anyone else. And it sort of extrudes work into my spare time that way. the alternative is missing deadlines, and sometimes that's the difficult sort of crux of the matter, is what am I going to prioritise.
Yeah.
It is hard though,
Prioritising,
because
yeah.
ultimately, we are getting paid to do a job, and sometimes I think there needs to be an acceptance that we do need to work a little bit out of time, and it's just the nature of what we do, and particularly consultancy wise, which is what I'm in. It very much ebbs and flows through the project, and well for you guys as well, ebbs and flows through the project life cycle in terms of how intense it is, and pushing up against deadlines and what might be expected. I think the key thing, both for us personally and certainly for the guys I manage, and I'm hoping it's the same in engineering, is that doesn't become the norm.
Yes.
It's that,
always the exception to the rule.
once a month becomes once a week, becomes, every day effectively before
Mhm.
you know it. And, I guess it really interests me as a company how we measure or don't measure that in terms of occurrences of it happening and such. And again, we've talked about that in wellness meetings quite frequently, that sort of trying to make sure that's not completely it's not accepted by the business as a normal mode of operation for MD, because it's just storing up problems downstream in terms of long-term sickness and such for people, really.
Thanks, Chris. That's really interesting. I think we all kind of were nodding away, like we feel a bit the same. We want to make sure it's an exception to the rule and doesn't become a rule.
Do you track those occurrences, Chris? Because I'm
Well,
quite sort of intent on keeping a timesheet, so I know when I've worked and when I've not, and I could say.
So no, in essence. And again, I think this probably works different from perhaps differently between engineering and consultancy, and perhaps even within consultancy different from team to team and different under certain line managers, in terms of how people manage that. I think there's probably a loose acceptance that if you work a bit more one day, you can balance that up the next day. But certainly we're not uniformly putting time over and above our 7.5 hours in our timesheets. Because again, I've had various discussions with various people around this, I think, and certainly it's something that's come up on wellness conversations a few times. And I think there are, challenges around the mechanics of how we would go about doing that as a business. But I think from numerous perspectives, it would be very valuable to do so. One, so that we could track people's wellness, well-being, and keep on top of that. But the other point is that in terms of the true cost of undertaking any job, if we're not billing all the hours that it actually took us to do that job, we don't actually understand if we're underbidding or overbidding, or it all just gets lost in the sort of mix. So yeah, it's interesting.
The one thing I would say with flexible working and well-being and those boundaries, it's making sure you have your hard edges, as Ollie's already pointed to, but where there's softness, where there can be flexibility, where there can be agility. And that's different for everybody. It comes back to that point of it's a rare occurrence, and it has to be the rare occurrence, not the norm. So if it starts coming into the norm, and this comes into why I'm on a different working pattern, I'd started tracking that the norm was I was eking into that 4th day consistently with email checking or conversations or logging into Teams and making sure that people were okay within my discipline. So the conversation was actually, that's not working brilliantly because I'm not getting paid for that. But I know that I need to do that, but it's not all the way through the year. But my school holidays are becoming a difficulty for me. Hence the discussion and a working pattern that suited my personal circumstance, but also supported the business needs for me being present. And it's those conversations and being open about what is hard, what is firmish, what is soft and blurry, and making sure that everybody is aware of that.
Thanks, everyone.
And are you, again, you obviously have responsibility for supervision and overseeing people and such. Is that in conflict then effectively with your working pattern to some extent, in that there's an expectation perhaps on you to be doing things on days when you're not around because you have those responsibilities?
No, because from day one of being recruited, I was always a flexible worker.
Okay.
So it's very understood from a concept, coming to SYSTRA, that I was not always going to be around for 5 days of the week. So there's always been a buy-in to that from the perspective of the team, of understanding where I am and where I'm not. understanding when they can and can't interact with me. So, and support networks there for the days that I'm not available.
Yeah.
And once people get used to it, and it's not the exception, it's the norm, everybody buys into that. But compared to 10 years ago, it's very different scenario, very different environment.
Just leading on from that then, have you ever felt that having this flexible working pattern, so a lot of you sound like you've had it for quite a number of years and it has come through from previous jobs. Do you feel like it's impacted your career in any way? If you ever did work what was considered full-time for your previous jobs or whatever, did you feel you noticed like a significant difference?
Yeah, it probably has, but I'm okay with that for now. I think when people are dishing out sort of juicy roles and opportunities, they tend to pick from the people that are visible. And out of sight is out of mind. I'm out of the office more than other people, so I'm out of mind a little bit more. I'm kind of okay with that compromise at the moment, though, because it was, you know, a 40-year career is a marathon, not a sprint. And when I went to flexible working, it was kind of, in my head, it was a choice of, am I going to do 3 days a week or no days a week of engineering? We'll see what happens in the fullness of time.
I don't think I'm, there's been a particular implication in terms of progression and such as a result of doing 4 rather than 5. I mean, I think, would I be doing anything different than I'm doing if I was working 4 days compared to 5? I don't think so. I think, I don't think I'd necessarily be responsible for more things and perhaps just, forced to delegate a little bit more and be a bit more efficient, perhaps. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think it's been something that's necessarily held me back. The other thing, again, because of the pattern that I was historically working, which was originally a full day Monday, 3/4 of a day Tuesday, a full day Wednesday, 3/4 of a day Thursday, and then every other Friday, I was about most of the time. So it was only every other Friday I wasn't around. So it, while I was working less time, I was, present in the office pretty much consistently. And again, the same's true even through COVID and such, the way that, I was able to be flexible in terms of, I think I ended up just working every day, but less hours to cover off homeschooling and dealing with the wee ones and stuff. I say wee ones are relatively large now, but I don't feel like I'm about less, even though I'm doing less time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
So I'm going to promise you, Vicky, that I'm not going to go off on a massive feminist rant on this one. Hand on heart, has being a flexible worker impacted my career? Probably. But I'm going to focus on the positives of has it improved in recent years? Absolutely. So I think there's been a significant change in perspective since the pandemic, since everybody is adopted hybrid working, that has significantly improved the perspective of a flexible worker. And I'm very conscious to use the word flexible worker because in my very early career of part-time working, the word part-time was used in a negative connotation. Oh, you're a part-timer. So this is what I'm trying to say. The improvement is there. There's been much more holistic understanding of the importance, benefits, and well-being of adopting a flexible working pattern for a not just for childcare reasons, for wellness or for health or for personal choice. My instance is childcare related. I could go back full time now, and I choose not to because I need the Friday to not work so that I can have downtime. And again, it's something I've been open about to people who are probably fed up at me talking about it. But there has been significant improvements. But early, I've been doing this for 13, 14 years now. The first 3 or 4 years was incredibly difficult, and I did leave a company that I was working for because of the negative implications of being that part-timer and some issues it would have been in relation to progression. I remember a phrase, and it stuck with me for a long time, of we'll see what you're like when you come back from maternity leave and whether you've still got it. And it's not. So for me, it's like that. There has been some negative impacts of perception of not being present, not being around, not being there. But that comes from the industry at that point. Was if you're not in the office 5 days a week, you're not doing your job. Whereas I think very much more in the last 5 years, the flexibility hasn't impacted what we deliver and what quality we deliver. So there has been a massive significant change. So I'm focusing on the more recent, and that's been that I'm now in a stage of my career where I'm thriving. Yes, my long-term career has been impacted by having a flexible working pattern.
It's great that you've noticed a difference between then and now, and that it is getting better going forward, which I think is what we want to see. It'd be more concerning if you'd said it was the other way.
I was going to say, I mean, I guess one thing that's happened post-COVID with sort of flexible working or hybrid working, sorry, is that it's not as obvious who's not present necessarily on a given day because nobody's consistently in the same place anyway. So, if there was perhaps a perception before when it was, 5 days in the office, it was very obvious who was on a reduced working pattern or flexible working or whatever. Whereas I think everyone's got more used to not necessarily having everybody around in the same place all the time. And I guess that's probably contributed perhaps to some extent to, the sort of more of a buy-in from the whole around this kind of thing.
And I'd add on top of that that's where technology has helped.
Yeah.
So, 13 years ago, video conferencing was a thing that you had in a meeting room that you had to book in. Video conferencing now is a standard that you can have a call from home as long as you got your background on, and host a professional call on Teams. So that's where technology has helped people who want to work hybrid, who want to work a flexible working pattern, to still have that connectivity in a way that 13 years ago wasn't possible.
So the next thing it would be good to discuss is about who you have at home. So there was a published research completed by Applied Psychology, which found that those that have fewer household members reported a better work-life balance. So yeah, who do you have at home? Have you found that to be the case? Did you actually think you were worse when, maybe back in the day when it was just yourself? Or Ollie, I don't know about your circumstances if you've got anyone at home that you have to look after. I know Chris and Charlotte have mentioned kids and stuff.
Yeah, I guess I can kick this off. It's just the two of us in the pot plants. So I don't have any caring responsibilities yet, but my parents are at that kind of getting to the end of spry old age, and maybe frail old age is around the corner. So it's going to be a thing in the future that I'll have to deal with. But right now, I could see how more people around the household might affect that work-life balance, but it's not something I'm having to deal with.
Yeah, so again, I think I touched upon this earlier, but the reason I'm on a reduced working pattern is as a result of needing to balance up childcare costs and not wanting the kids to be in childcare the whole time when they were little. So my other half and I both, when she went back to work, we were both on 4-day weeks, and various permutations of how that worked to deal with things as they moved from nursery to school, and now they're in secondary school, and ultimately they're big enough to let themselves in the house, so we don't really need to be back. So strictly speaking, I could go back to working 5 days, but I just like having that extra bit of flexibility, and it lets me fit things in that I wouldn't be able to fit in otherwise. I play in a band, so it gives me a bit more space around that. I'm able to gym on a Friday rather than gym being a thing that perhaps is just something that can happen at the weekend and stuff. So yeah, I don't think I would have done it if I hadn't had the little ones, but in retrospect I can see the benefit, even if I didn't, in having that situation, just to have, ultimately you're working to live. And if it's dragging you down and you're not getting as much out of life, then it feels like if you're able to make that choice and you want to make that choice, then it's great to be able to do it. And I think that's probably the boat I'm in now, in that I could jump back to 5 days, but yeah,
you don't want to.
Don't want to. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that. Yeah, exactly that.
That's brilliant. Yeah. So like Chris, both myself and my husband are on flexible working arrangements. So it's me, the husband, 2 kids and a cat, and a aquarium full of, well, not suppose it's an aquarium, fish tank full of fish. I don't have my parents or family or a significant pool of friends locally, so we've always had to plan for the childcare being delivered by ourselves. So again, it's that flexibility and the agility and the flexibility. That very early days with just one child, it was myself that was the flexible work, and my husband was still full-time, and he realized he was missing out, and he wanted to be part of their upbringing, and he wanted to be part of their young preschool existence. So he very rapidly chose to go to a 4-day week. I was on the 3-day week, and it's prioritizing that, as Chris said, it's the working to live side of things rather than living to work. And that doesn't suit everybody, and it's not what everybody's unique, and that everyone's different. But for us, it was meeting childcare commitments and not having to overspend on childcare, but also being present and available for our kids for supporting them as they were going through young age challenges. They're now getting to that stage where they probably won't need us around as much, but I now know I need that time for my own personal well-being, sanity and health. So the likelihood of going back full-time, I've been very open from day one with SYSTRA that I don't want to go back full-time. I like being a flexible worker, because that extra day that I have is for me, because I am a mother, I am a wife, I am an engineer, but I'm also Charlotte Woodhall-Jones with her own aspirations, her own desires, her own creativity. And that Friday, that's my day. So that's the day that I go to my personal trainer. That's the day that, not so much at the moment because the creativity is a little bit stifled, but it's the day that I do quilting. It's the day that the paints come out and the small plastic figures and Warhammer gets painted, which is something that I do with the children.
Yes.
Oh yes, fellow neek.
So it's the kids, but yes, I appreciate it.
It's definitely the kids, but I enjoy the painting. So it's, for me, that day is my day, and I need that day because it's the balance of the stresses and strains of the rest of the week that pull on all parts of that bucket. That's my fill-up day. And that balance is not always perfect, and I would say my bucket is more draining than filling at the moment. But I also know that I get very Fran mentioned the conversation that she had in the last podcast about SAD syndrome with Charlotte Rogers. I know that I suffer with that, and I know that that's something that I need to balance. So I also know not to push myself if actually on a Friday I really don't feel like painting anything, or I don't fancy getting the sewing machine out, and all I want to do is sit in Netflix and binge. But I know that that's what I need to do. But that's on my day.
A different form of refilling your bucket. That.
It is.
So I guess we've talked a bit about being in the office and working from home, and we've obviously mentioned about COVID and how that sort of forced everyone to work from home, and how we're now in this hybrid working period. I'd like to sort of talk a bit about how you manage your work-life balances whilst working from home. Do you have like a physical space? I know Charlotte's already mentioned she has an office that she can shut the door on. Does everyone have that? Do you find anything that particularly helps? How do you have that balance when you're working from home?
I don't like working from home at all, and as a result, I'm aiming to be in the office as much as possible, basically. So for the most part, I think I'm probably about 80% of my working time's in the office. If I'm working on a Friday morning, then I'm at home doing that. But yeah, it is a challenge. And I think part of that for me comes back to lockdown and really not enjoying lockdown at all. And it almost is like, just takes me back to that kind of period where it wasn't a great deal of fun at all. But yeah, like I say, so I don't really have that challenge because I think I'm at home as little as possible working, basically.
So I really like working at home some of the time. In that I've got a corner of a room set up at home. That's my desk set up, and it's very distraction free. So when I'm working there, I find I can sort of really submerge into something for 2 or 3 hours and realize I've not had a drink or gone to the toilet or anything like that. I've just been completely involved in the activity, and for the right things, I find that really rewarding. But I also need to balance the fact that I've got a lot of experience to share, and I need to be around other people in the office for their benefit and a bit for my sanity as well. I can't do that stuff all the time. So I've got to balance those two things, really.
When you're working from your corner of your room, do you find you can stay way too late past your working hours at your desk, or do you find like you reach your, I think you said 7.5 hours, and you can shut your laptop and go and do whatever you like to do in your free time? Or do you find it a bit trickier when you're in that corner space?
It depends on the task. Sometimes you look up and it's 7:30 at night and you've been in that flow state, really in it. But I sort of logging my hours. It's what makes me feel I've got control over it. I'm measuring it so I can manage it. I'd say that probably the 2 bits of work over the past few years that I'm most proud of I did on Sundays. So it's not that I'm just clock on, clock off, and that's what it's all about. There's more to it than that for me, but feeling like I know that I've worked on average 3.056 days per week since I started flexible working gives me a sense of control over it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got to stop giggling about the fact that Ollie's got it down to a 3 decimal place. I have no idea what my average. An engineer who's loving spreadsheets for the sound of it as well. I am incredibly privileged, and I'm very aware of my privilege that I chose to make and build an office in the garden during lockdown. I was one of those. But we had space, and I was one of the learnings from lockdown is I had an office that was shared with my creative space, and that was the worst thing I did because it very blurred those boundaries. And when I went up to use fabric and play with fabric and get inspired by fabric, all I could see was textbooks, and it was drawing my eye. So I knew that I couldn't have that couldn't happen. It was too much of a blurred boundary. So I needed physical separation. I work incredibly well at home when I need to do things at home, but I really enjoy coming in and interacting with people in the office. And again, it's that balance of the two, and being very self-aware but also externally aware of what's the need of you and what's the need of the people. So if there's something I need focus on, I can't be in the office. Or if I'm in the office, you'll see me with headphones on because I need distraction from the noise. So I try to make it so that when I'm at home, I'm doing things I know are best for me to do at home. And when I'm in the office, it's doing the interactions with my team, interactions with other disciplines, the networking that needs to happen in that face-to-face environment. But having that physical detachment for me was incredibly important because it started blurring the edges too much and the permeation into the home space, so I couldn't switch off, or it was actually reducing the enjoyment of things that I've found enjoyable to the extent I didn't want to do them anymore. So, but I say I'm very aware and recognise my privilege of having that space. Not everybody can do that.
That's brilliant. Thank you all so much. I think we'll just tie up there. Thank you all so much for your time and coming along today.
No worries.
You're welcome.
Very welcome.